Megan approached the mirror and scrutinized her reflection attentively. Her gentle, natural makeup accentuated the freshness and youthfulness of her skin. Her dark, glossy hair was pulled back into a low ponytail, with a couple of strands framing her face in soft waves. The white dress with a lace bodice fit beautifully on her slender figure. It wasn't for nothing that she had been going for a morning run every day for years and hitting the gym 3 times a week. Even today, on her wedding day, she woke up early to make sure not to miss her workout. The bride was already prepared, although the car wouldn't arrive for another hour. This habit of getting ready early had stuck with her since her childhood, where discipline and punctuality were even more important than schooling. Megan remembered those joyless years vividly. Perhaps if she had entered that place from the moment of her birth and hadn't known the joy of family life before, she wouldn't have suspected the existence of such an obvious contrast and would have considered that institution her home. But it happened that she remembered her parents well. At the thought of her mother, tears welled up in Megan's eyes. Although Megan was only 10 years old when her mother passed away, she remembered her beautiful eyes, tender hands, and her melodious voice. The house was almost always filled with either contemporary songs or melancholic ballads. Mom was always singing something, while cooking lunch in the kitchen, tidying up, or sewing. There were particularly tender relations between her parents. The girl never heard them argue. They only debated which movie to watch on TV in the evenings. Dad jokingly called his wife an artist, and she laughed in response. Little Megan then thought that the whole world was as peaceful, measured, and filled with warmth and music as their home. One day, her parents announced to the girl that she would soon have a little brother or sister. Megan eagerly anticipated, cautiously touching her mother's slightly rounded belly and imagining how joyfully they would live as a family of 4. But tragedy struck their family unnoticed. That day, returning from school to an unusually quiet apartment, Megan immediately sensed that something had happened. Then the neighbor came to inquire about her well-being. From her, the girl learned that her mother had been taken to the hospital during the day. The uncertainty frightened and troubled her, and time passed unusually slowly. Late in the evening, her silent and pale father came home with a bottle of alcohol in his hands. Megan, frightened, stood at the kitchen doorway and watched as he poured a faceted glass with the foul liquid and drank it. Finally noticing his daughter, he woke up, rubbed his face with his hands, and sighed deeply. The little girl's heart pounded fiercely. She had never seen her father like this before. "Sweetie, your mom is no longer with us," he said, his voice unpleasantly hoarse. His face reddened from the influence of alcohol. "What?" She couldn't quite grasp the information, but her voice trembled with a premonition of something dreadful. The man leaned back in his chair and wearily closed his eyes. "She passed away along with your little brother," he said, inhaling loudly. And then a horrifying sound burst from his lips, either a groan or a howl. Megan shivered. The poor girl couldn't decide what shocked her more in that moment: the news of her mother's death or her father's terrible reaction. Life split into 2 halves, before and after. The one that came before, happy and carefree, now seemed like a fairy tale from a distant land. The one that followed plunged the girl into a terrifying reality. All their neighbors and acquaintances gathered for the funeral. People loved the kind and sociable woman who always listened sympathetically to the problems of her neighbors, helped them with money, despite their modest family budget. The night before the funeral, Megan cried by her mother's coffin, only to be literally forced to get some sleep by her neighbor at dawn. In the morning, Megan felt like it was all just a horrible dream. But then her consciousness brought her back to the cruel reality. That frosty, overcast day remained etched in her memory for a lifetime. The silence struck her as people solemnly approached the still young woman to bid her farewell. Only the quiet rustle of the funeral procession steps and the occasional, almost indiscernible whisper broke the silence. Tears streamed down Megan's cheeks incessantly. Unexpectedly, but still silently, snow began to fall, quickly turning into a full-blown blizzard. The cemetery workers hurried the mourners, covered the coffin with a lid, and began to nail it shut. The sound of each hammered nail echoed painfully in the heart of the miserable girl. Her father, who until then had been staring blankly and silently, suddenly groaned again, a sound echoed by several women. An invisible hand gripped Megan's throat tightly. Her vision darkened, and she nearly lost consciousness. Choking on the lack of air, the grave diggers swiftly finished their task with familiar movements and covered the clay mound with flowers. Her father approached the grave and fell to his knees, right on the chilly ground. The girl went to her father, helped him to his feet, and led him away from the place where their beloved mother and wife had found her eternal rest. Megan's father now drank more alcohol every day, which only temporarily dulled his emotional pain. After work, he would come home already intoxicated and continue clinking glasses in the kitchen until late at night, reducing himself to a pitiful state. When the drunken man started singing loudly and crying, losing his balance and accidentally breaking fragile objects, Megan would drag him to the bedroom and tuck him into bed. In the morning, he would guiltily look into the strict, yet kind eyes of his daughter, now grown up too early, and swear to her that it was the last time. In the evening, it all repeated again. At school, the teachers felt sorry for the former top student, but the girl wasn't too bothered by it anymore. She had to take full responsibility for household chores. But what worried her the most was her father. Megan pitied the man who couldn't control his own emotions. She watched with sorrow as he struggled with himself. But she couldn't help him in any way. Only the arrival of social workers at their apartment truly worried the man. The prospect of losing his daughter made him give up his destructive habit. For almost 3 weeks, the man was unusually quiet. But then he suddenly came home drunk, with an open bottle of strong alcohol, went straight to his room, and fell silent. Megan was offended by her father and didn't even go to see him. After all, he promised that things would be different now. Maybe she just wasn't needed by him anymore. In the morning, he didn't wake up. Doctors arrived and declared death from alcohol poisoning. It was a real tragedy. The little girl cursed herself for being upset with her father when he was dying in another room. If it weren't for her pride, they could have saved him. This thought tormented her from within, constantly reminding her of the enormous guilt she had imposed on herself. Left orphaned at 12 and ending up in a foster home, Megan often wondered, why was fate so cruel to her? Why did it generously bless others while mercilessly taking from her? There were no answers. Megan forced a strained smile, trying to forget the unpleasant memories as quickly as possible. Today would be different. Her dream would finally come true. What she had been striving for so hard for the past few years. Now she wouldn't have to go to the hated office and sit at the computer for hours, pretending to be busy. Aaron, of course, was pitiful. She constantly had to deceive him. After all, he was truly madly in love with her. Did she have the right to treat him like this? A year ago, when they allegedly met by chance at the gym, such a thought wouldn't have crossed Megan's mind. He was just a means to achieve her goal back then. By that time, she knew absolutely everything about Aaron. Aaron was 26. His parents owned 2 companies, a small chain of gas stations, and a dozen other smaller enterprises. In the family, everything was controlled by his strict and suspicious mother. Despite the huge incomes, she monitored all her son's expenses and ruthlessly destroyed all his relationships with girls. Aaron was nothing like her. Although he graduated from law school and headed one of the companies, the dull, monotonous work didn't bring him joy. He wanted something beautiful, creative. He often tried to break free from his parents' control and independently build his life. Once Aaron even bought himself a good camera and became seriously interested in photography. He discovered in himself the ability to see special beauty in ordinary things. To be able to capture it correctly and show it to others was a real talent. However, his mother immediately put a stop to these creative impulses and forced her son to continue their family business. Megan set herself a difficult task: to make the heir of immense wealth fall in love with her. True, she had to get a job in an office to avoid arousing suspicion from Suzanne, as she would surely scrutinize her life down to the smallest detail. It would be good if she didn't find out what the girl had been doing for the past few years. There were no difficulties with Aaron. He immediately liked this smiling, cute girl with a pleasant character and a wonderful figure. And Megan had already studied the field of photography in advance. Their common interest turned out to be decisive. Aaron became convinced that this amazing girl was his destiny. However, dealing with his mother turned out to be much more complicated. She subjected Megan to checks, threatened her, and tried to bribe her. The girl didn't give up and declared that she sincerely loved Aaron. Surprisingly, the guy also showed firmness of character and insisted on his decision to tie the knot with his beloved. Indeed, Aaron turned out to be a great guy. He prepared grand romantic surprises for Megan. They went to the sea, flew in a hot air balloon. Next to this naive and kind guy, the girl felt calm and protected. But falling in love was not part of her plan, and she ruthlessly suppressed any emerging sympathy. All for one purpose, just a little bit more, and the goal would be achieved. No, she's not a monster at all. She just wants to restore justice. After all, she suffered for so many days. The phone rang. The car is downstairs. Come out. Megan put the phone in her bag and went downstairs. Seeing the car sent by her future mother-in-law as a means of transportation, the girl burst out laughing loudly. How this woman doesn't love her. The bride was met by an old car that could literally fall apart on the go. Both front wings had long since lost their original paint and practically rotted away. Corrosion had not spared the other parts of the car. It was covered in rusty patches. Susan was clearly provoking the girl. However, Megan couldn't be swayed from her path so easily. The bride calmly lifted the hem of her white dress and got into the car. The wedding palace was full of people. In one of the celebration halls, guests had already gathered for Aaron and Megan. The girl's side had only 2 friends, whom she asked to keep her plan a secret. The groom ran to meet her and gently took her hand. His eyes sparkled with happiness. "You look beautiful, my dear." He couldn't help but admire. Susan slyly asked how Megan had gotten there. Megan just smiled sweetly in response. "Perfectly. Thank you for your concern." Susan smirked arrogantly and took the microphone into her hands. "Well, our spinster has finally appeared." She laughed. Aaron looked reproachfully at his mother and tried to stop her, but she still hoped to provoke the bride. "Dear guests, I want to introduce you to our bride. Please understand my son's choice. His bride was raised in an orphanage. Despite this, we are ready to honor her and accept her into our wonderful family, which has always been known for its openness." Megan listened to her monologue with absolute indifference. A message came to the girl's phone. She looked at the screen and smiled satisfactorily. "Well, it's time." She approached the self-satisfied Suzanne and took the second microphone. "Now, it's my turn. I would like to thank you for the offer to become part of your family, but it's incompatible with my honor." She looked into the puzzled woman's eyes and finished the sentence. "Incompatible with my honor as a police officer." The smile instantly disappeared from potential mother-in-law Megan's face, and the bride continued. "I refuse to tie my destiny with people who increase their fortune through blackmail, raiding, and contract killings." The guests looked at each other in confusion. The girl continued her shocking speech. "A few years ago, I already had a fiancé. We loved each other very much and had already set the date for our wedding." Megan's voice trembled. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly composed herself and continued. "However, his business caught the eye of an entrepreneur, and she decided to eliminate her competitor and take over his business." "What do you mean?" the pale Susan said. "I mean that in order to gather evidence of your involvement in the murder of my beloved, I went to work in the police and agreed to an undercover operation. Now I'm a police officer." The door to the hall swung open, and a squad of 6 people in dark uniforms briskly entered the room. Megan confidently approached the squad, took a piece of paper from them, and solemnly presented it to her prospective mother-in-law. From the outside, it all looked like a scripted wedding prank. The guests still couldn't believe what was happening. But Susan was not in the mood for jokes at all. "Susan, this is a warrant for your and your husband's arrest. You are accused of several contract killings, raiding, and blackmail." Erin's mother even dropped the microphone from her hands and tried to move towards the exit. But the law enforcement officers quickly positioned themselves in her way. Aaron first watched in shock from the sidelines, thinking he was going crazy. Then he rushed to save his parents. But his path was blocked, and he turned to Megan for explanations. "Megan, what's going on?" The girl had been waiting for this conversation for a long time. She suppressed her excitement and coldly replied with pre-prepared phrases. "Aaron, I'm sorry, but I'm not who I pretended to be. I've been working in the police for 6 years. I'm very sorry, but your parents are really involved in criminal activities." The young man could not believe what had happened. Just a few minutes ago, anticipating the long-awaited moment of marrying his beloved girl, he dreamed of a future happy family life. And now he found himself in the midst of chaos. He stared at the familiar features of his former fiancée and realized that he didn't know this person at all. Was there anything in this girl that he loved with all his heart? Or was she absolutely foreign to him? Megan left. It was hard for her to be near him. The sad eyes of the guy seemed to see right through her. Her main goal had been achieved. But strangely, it didn't make her feel any lighter. For 6 long years, Megan had been heading towards this moment, the triumph of retribution. And all this was for Matt, or rather, in his memory. Back then, a very young girl met Matt right on the street. Coming out of the underground pedestrian crossing, Megan stumbled, and the strap on her old shoes treacherously broke. A handsome young man noticed the girl's distress and rushed to her aid. "Miss, let me try to fix it," he offered. When Megan met his friendly gaze, everything around her suddenly ceased to exist. The shoes, cars, street, passers-by. Everything remained somewhere far away, in a parallel universe. Perhaps this is what love at first sight feels like. Matt also struggled with his torn shoe and sadly informed the girl about it. Megan found his attitude towards minor mishaps amusing, and the young man, looking at her seriously, suddenly said, "I recognize you. You're Cinderella. Let me tell you a secret. I'm that prince. Now I'm obliged to help you." The girl laughed. "Let's go in here." The guy pointed to the shoe store sign. "No, thank you." Megan hurriedly declined. She knew for sure that the prices in this store were too high. "You forgot that I'm your savior," the guy said and elegantly took her arm. Matt turned out to be a true gentleman. He bought the girl new shoes and drove her home. Megan feverishly took out her last money from her wallet to give it to Matt for the shoes. But the young man just kissed her hand and said goodbye, not even leaving his phone number. All the girl could do was to yearn, remembering this amazing encounter. But the fairy tale was just beginning. The next day, Matt brought her a huge bouquet of roses of an incredible lilac shade and invited Megan for a walk. Their relationship developed slowly, gradually. With every phone call and meeting, the girl's heart skipped a beat with happiness. She felt that justice was restored and only good things awaited her ahead. The guy introduced her to his parents, and a few months later, he made her an official proposal to become his wife. They scheduled the wedding for June. The bride was fully immersed in pleasant chores. She sewed herself a wedding dress, made a guest list, and planned the menu at the restaurant. She wanted to think through and take into account every detail of the grand celebration. But for the groom, summer never came. That cursed call from Matt's friend, police investigator Sean, with tragic news, seemed to send Megan back to her tragic past. She remembered how she arrived at the crime scene and in hysterics, screaming and crying, tried to break through the cordon until she was taken away and calmed down by doctors. Megan still couldn't understand how she survived her beloved man's funeral. It seemed like her soul died with him. But after a few months of complete prostration, there arose a sharp desire to find out the reasons for her fiancé's death. All the evidence pointed to a contract killing. In a private conversation, Sean told Megan that Matt had long complained of threats from a certain family, but there was no evidence of their involvement in the crime. It was then that Megan vowed to find and punish the killer herself, no matter how long it took. The path to vengeance turned out to be long and difficult. Police academy, hard work in the investigation department, and then, as it turned out later, the most difficult task. After all, initially, she didn't know that Aaron wasn't involved in his parents' criminal schemes. When she realized this, she even wanted to give up the investigation, because an honest girl didn't want to deceive a good guy. But Sean was adamant, as they had no other option. If she really wanted to prove this family's involvement in the crime, she had to complete the task. Information came in that there were pieces of evidence stored in the suspect's house, and Megan's main task was to find and photograph them. Everything went according to plan. Almost. There was a search in Suzanne's office. Experts in gloves systematically removed all the documents and items. Sean smiled at Megan, who entered the office, adjusting the police badge on her uniform. "All the papers are in place," he said, rubbing his hands satisfied. Suddenly, he snatched a piece of paper from the table and handed it to the girl. "Megan, take a look. Maybe you'll find this interesting." It was an adoption document. It turns out, Aaron's parents adopted him from an orphanage at an early age. So that's why he doesn't resemble them at all. Megan remembered his kind gaze. Something suddenly tightened in the girl's chest, and she had a strong desire to see her former fiancé again. The young man sat on the spacious couch in the living room, staring blankly at one spot, waiting for the outsiders to finish their work and leave him alone. Megan quietly sat down next to him. She felt uneasy. The guilt for ruining the guy's life tormented her. "Do you hate me?" she asked softly. Aaron suddenly snapped out of his daze and hurried to reply. "Don't be ridiculous. I understand you perfectly well. I just still can't understand how my family could do such a thing." Megan handed Aaron the document from the office. "They're not your biological parents." The guy studied the document and just let out a deep sigh. It was hard to surprise him with anything now. "It doesn't make it easier for me, but many things are starting to make sense," he said sadly. Such a calm reaction further puzzled the girl. "Aaron, when I agreed to the task, I never imagined that the son of criminals could turn out to be such a wonderful guy like you. With each passing day, it became harder and harder for me to lie to you, because I liked you more and more." The guy turned his head and looked into Megan's face, trying to understand how sincerely she was saying this to him. There was regret in her gaze. The tears filling the girl's eyes struck Aaron. He had never seen Megan like this. From the very beginning of their relationship, he felt something left unsaid. He understood that there was a secret in the heart of his beloved, still inaccessible to him. But now everything was different. The girl suddenly became more sincere and showed her vulnerability and nobility. Here she is, the real one, maybe even better than the one he initially fell in love with. In a burst of emotion, Aaron grabbed Megan's hand and pressed it to his trembling chest. "If this is true, then let's start all over again. I can't imagine my life without you." The girl suddenly flinched in fear. "I'm sorry, but I need time to sort out my feelings," she whispered, gently removing her hand. Looking into the guy's eyes once more as a farewell. Aaron spent the weekend on the couch, just staring at the ceiling. He didn't want to eat or drink. Megan answered his calls with something incoherent, constantly promising to call back. At the beginning of the week, Aaron made an effort, finally gathered his thoughts, and went to work. The colleagues whispered behind his back and watched him with guarded glances. There were already 6 resignation letters on his desk. His deputy, Luis, immediately appeared in his office with a concerned expression on his face. "Aaron, we have big problems. Clients and partners are canceling meetings one after another. 14 refusals already. Our reputation is under great threat." Aaron anticipated such a turn of events, but the scale of it caused serious concern. Although law wasn't his favorite thing, too much time and effort had been invested, and he didn't want to be left with nothing, especially since all of his parents' business had been arrested. The guy feverishly tried to find a way out of the situation. Was there any way to influence their decision? They said they don't want to have anything to do with criminals. These words gave Aaron goosebumps. Of course, now they considered him a bandit too. However, he wasn't about to give up. "Luis, today we're actively working on all key clients throughout the day. And of course, we're involving our advertising department in the work," he commanded. "All the employees in the advertising department have resigned." The deputy hurried to reply. "Okay, I'll take care of this matter myself," he said, already with a calm voice. Luis sincerely sympathized with his boss. He had been working in this field for a long time and had changed several jobs. But Aaron was the most generous and humane of all the leaders. For a whole week, Aaron and Luis unsuccessfully tried to improve their situation, but the business was already on the brink of bankruptcy. Aaron felt simply awful. Another tense working day gave him no certainty. In complete despair, he got behind the wheel of his car. Resentment towards the whole world settled heavily in the guy's soul and made him press the gas pedal forcefully. Sad thoughts clouded his mind. His parents turned out to be criminals. His beloved girl left him on the day of their wedding, and now she didn't even want to see him. The business was on the verge of bankruptcy. Now he was an outcast in this hostile world. Fatigue enveloped his body, and the desire to end it all overwhelmed him. His hands didn't want to control not only the car, but also his own life. His mind seemed to shut down, registering only a strong impact. No one answered the call for a long time, and then the beep suddenly ceased with a hoarse voice. "Aaron." Megan was taken aback by the unexpectedness. The unfamiliar voice coughed and said, "Hello. Aaron is in the intensive care unit." Megan paled. Darkness suddenly descended before her eyes, and she had to grip the edge of the table to keep from falling. "What happened to him?" she whispered weakly. "Come over. You'll find out everything on the spot." "Megan, what's wrong with you?" Sean asked, concerned. She regained her balance again. There was no time to explain. With trouble came enlightenment. The girl finally realized that she truly loved him, sincerely. How did she not understand this before? Maybe because this love didn't come in an instant, like with Matt, but carefully and imperceptibly. Probably, she didn't see it yet because Aaron was always there, ready to rush to her call at any moment. Although most likely, she just didn't appreciate him. No, she couldn't lose another dear person. At first, the doctor refused to talk to her. He demanded only the closest relatives of the guy. Megan had to use her police ID. "He has already been questioned by the police," the doctor replied impassively. In desperation, the girl was ready to burst into tears. "Please," she whispered. "The young man was in a car accident. He has a concussion, chest contusion, and spinal injury. Right now, he's in a coma. When he will come out of it is unknown." Every word of the doctor painfully wounded Megan. She thought she would go crazy imagining how all this happened. Nevertheless, the girl managed to penetrate into the hospital ward. In the middle of the spacious room stood a functional bed, at the head of which glowed with multicolored sensors and a small screen, a modern device for artificial lung ventilation. Her eyes filled with tears at the sight of the motionless body of her beloved man lying on the blue sheet. Several sterile bandages covered wounds on his arms, chest, and face. "Aaron," she whispered, touching his soft hair gently. In response, there was only silence. Only the steady beeping of the machine filled the air. Megan didn't know what she was hoping for. The feeling of pity was replaced by tormenting herself. After all, She was also complicit in what happened. For Aaron, how he must have suffered. Now she was completely repentant and understood what she felt. Even if he couldn't hear her, she still had to say everything. "Forgive me, Aaron," she said aloud and squeezed his cold hand with her trembling fingers. "I shouldn't have treated you like that. Only now do I realize that I can't live without you. I love you very much." Aaron's hand trembled. Overjoyed, Megan watched as Aaron slightly opened his eyes, and she immediately rushed into the corridor in search of doctors. On the way home, Megan stopped at the store for groceries and medicines. It had been a week since she brought Aaron home and settled in the adjacent guest bedroom to always be near him. The guy changed a lot after the accident. At first, he was happy every time Megan came, but as he realized the helplessness of his own body, his mood deteriorated. Doctors made no predictions, only saying that everything depended on the patient himself. He needed a long recovery. He reacted aggressively to the modern wheelchair Megan managed to find with difficulty. "I won't ride in this," he said. The guy stopped fighting altogether. Now, when he saw his former fiancée, he turned his eyes to the wall and said, "Megan, please leave. You can't help me anymore. Live your life. You don't owe me anything." Everything was getting worse. Depression had completely taken over his mind, and he had resigned himself to it. Nothing pleased him anymore. Neither Megan with her devoted gaze, ready to do anything for him, nor good news from work that finally his business was no longer under threat. Attempts at therapeutic exercise for quick results were futile, and Aaron had completely given up. His body weakened. His legs remained immobile. Aaron just lay there, waiting for death. Megan's heart ached painfully at the sight of his mental torment. Thoughts of her beloved haunted her both at home and at work. In the police department corridor, Megan met Carmen, the staff psychologist and her best friend by coincidence. "Carmen, can I come to your office for tea?" she asked shyly. Between them, this phrase was a code, meaning that one of them urgently needed help. Without hesitation, Carmen took Megan by the hand and led her to her office. "Let's go. I just got some delicious tea. Let's try it now." After listening to Megan's problem, Carmen immediately said confidently, "You need motivation." Megan sighed in response. "I've tried. Nothing helps." The friend paused for a moment and voiced a new idea. "Well, why not get him a dog? Let him walk with it, and at the same time, he'll get some movement." "That's a great idea. Let it be a real friend," thought the delighted girl. At first, she browsed through advertisements from breeders for a long time, but then suddenly remembered about the dog shelter. Once she had given acquaintances a lift there, and they claimed that it was the only place to find the most loyal dog. A bespectacled girl led Megan into the shelter territory and promptly asked, "Are you looking for a specific breed?" The animals, confined behind bars, made a depressing impression on Megan. Some of them stuck their curious noses out of the cages and greeted her with excited barking. Some just lay in the corner of the enclosure and didn't react at all, perhaps having lost hope forever. Megan cursed herself for coming here. How could she choose someone and leave someone else? "Just focus," advised the shelter worker. She had seen this expression on visitors' faces many times. "And there are puppies over there." She pointed to the right. The puppy cages were stacked in 2 tiers. As Megan entered the room, she saw sad eyes, then a narrow little snout, and a body with crooked legs. "Take me," pleaded the puppy with a touching gaze. Megan couldn't move any further. "Oh, this puppy is sick. I'm warning you right away," the bespectacled girl hurriedly shouted. "We caught him in a dumpster 2 days ago. He has rickets from malnutrition. Look at how many other puppies we have." She pointed to the others, but Megan didn't hear her anymore. She had already made her choice. The happy pup snuggled up to Megan's chest and quieted down. Megan whispered to him, "We'll leave here soon. Hang in there, my good boy." Aaron, as always, lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. Megan approached him and, with a mysterious expression, holding something to her chest, announced, "I have a gift for you." Aaron indifferently watched as she took something out. What other gifts? He wouldn't need anything else in this life, but what she unexpectedly presented to him struck him to the core. In his childhood, his mother never allowed him to have a dog, although he endlessly begged her for one. Aaron would get upset at first, but then he accepted it. So the surprise was a success. He looked into the puppy's kind eyes and saw his own reflection in them. The little one happily whimpered and licked the new owner right on the face. Aaron was almost overwhelmed by the unexpected surge of tenderness. He pulled the little one towards him and hugged him to his chest. Suddenly, Megan said, "He's sick. I've already taken him to the vet and bought him medicine." The little one, as if to prove her point, struggled to work across the bed on his crooked legs. "Oh my God, just like me," thought Aaron. Suddenly, he felt an incredible surge of energy. He was ready to jump out of bed and go for his new friend's treatment. However, no miracle occurred. The lower part of his body was still paralyzed. Realizing the situation, Aaron asked with a tremor in his voice, "Is this a mockery?" "Of course not. The doctor said it would take a lot of effort to heal him. But we can do it, right? Or should I take him back?" Megan looked at Aaron with tear-filled eyes. Aaron snapped to attention. No, he couldn't subject his new friend to eternal torment and death. Now Aaron felt responsible for the fate of the sick animal, which had suffered from hunger and cold but hadn't lost faith in humans. He spent hours doing various exercises and henceforth gratefully accepted Megan's help. The little Milo, named for his shiny brown eyes, never left his owner's side. The muscles of the guy became stronger, and now he could sit in the wheelchair by himself. He now knew that it was just an everyday helper in his numerous tasks, for which he unexpectedly found strength and desire. Although very slowly, nerve conductivity in the lower limbs was returning. The well-fed and treated puppy also gradually began to stand on his hind legs. Previously, Megan's morning began with the usual refusal of poor Aaron to eat and bitter coffee. Now, the restless Milo, with the first rays of the sun, considered it his duty to wake up all the household members so that they too could rejoice in the beginning of a happy day. And what else could a day be when there's a home, food, and everyone loves you? With a cheerful bark, he limped from room to room until the owners finally gathered in the kitchen to have breakfast together. Aaron started going to the nearby park in his wheelchair, always followed by the growing puppy. Suddenly, he wanted to take the dusty camera out of the bedside table again. Megan suggested that Aaron start his own page on the internet to publish his work. Over time, Aaron's hobby turned into his favorite profession, and the faith of his beloved girlfriend only inspired him more and more each day. Gradually, his health also improved. One beautiful day, he could already move independently without a wheelchair, relying only on a cane. Almost a year has passed. During this time, Milo has turned into a handsome adult dog. Only a slight curvature of his front legs reminded of his previous illness. He accompanied his beloved owners everywhere, proudly wearing a locket, a symbol of his owner's love. Every morning, Megan went for a run, and Aaron accompanied her with a camera, trying to find inspiration. 2 months ago, Aaron's parents were sentenced, and now he was packing food bags for them in prison. Megan just silently watched from the sidelines. In response to her reproachful look, Aaron said, "Understand, I can't do it differently. They are still my parents. I have no others and never will." The girl shrugged, but obediently took Aaron to the prison for their date every time. Today was a special day. For almost 3 months, Aaron had been preparing his own photo exhibition at the gallery. He was very nervous because even Megan hadn't seen some of the works. It was unknown what impression they would make on the public. And would anyone show up at all? It's one thing to have fans on the internet, but quite another to interact with people in person. As the opening day of the exhibition approached, Aaron's doubts grew stronger. Today, he hardly slept at all. As Megan left for work, she kissed him gently, promised not to be late for the exhibition, and tried to support him again, reminding him that they had done everything they could. All that was left was to wait for the public's opinion. At the appointed time, a taxi arrived for Aaron to take him to the exhibition venue. The taxi driver kept looking back at the man and suddenly asked, "Are you the famous photographer?" Aaron was embarrassed. "Yes, I'm a photographer, but I'm not sure if I'm famous." The taxi driver smiled. "Thanks to your work, my daughter has become seriously interested in photography. She now spends all her time outdoors trying to capture beautiful shots. By the way, she was planning to attend your exhibition today." Aaron's anxiety seemed to vanish somewhere. He managed to instill a love of beauty in at least one person. You could say his mission was accomplished. He didn't expect such success. Representatives from television even came to the exhibition to shoot a report about the talented photographer. People, both familiar and unfamiliar, approached Aaron just to shake his hand with gratitude. Everyone was thrilled, but Megan was the most emotional of all. She was very proud of her beloved. There's potential in everyone. The main thing is to see it in time and unlock it. Aaron approached Megan from behind and enveloped her in tender embrace. It was the best day of his life. "Megan, will you marry me?" he whispered to her. Megan almost cried with joy. "Aaron, thank you for believing in me back then. I love you."